The fracture. In the year 2146, humanity had conquered almost every frontier, space travel, AI, even the extension of life itself. But nothing compared to the achievement of the fracture device. It was the key to the multiverse, the technology that allowed people to peer into alternate realities, to see versions of their lives in other worlds. Initially hailed as the greatest invention of all time, it promised limitless possibilities. But soon humanity learned that some doors should never be opened. Dr. Ethan Voss was one of the leading scientists behind the project. He had seen 1,000 versions of himself, some thriving, others suffering in ways he couldn't imagine. There were worlds where he never married, where his children never existed, where wars ravaged the earth or peace reigned eternal. But then there were other worlds, darker ones, worlds where the rules of reality no longer applied. One night, after a series of particularly disturbing observations, Dr. Voss noticed something that froze the blood in his veins, a shadow. In the corner of the screen displaying an alternate reality, there was something that shouldn't have been there, a figure standing in the exact same spot across multiple universes. At first he thought it was a glitch, a smear on the lens of the fracture device. But as he flipped through universe after universe, the shadow remained constant, watching, waiting. He called his colleague, Dr. Serena Klein, to take a look. As she scrolled through the realities, her face grew pale. "That's not possible," she whispered. "The multiverse is infinite. Nothing should be the same across every universe." But it was. The figure began to move. Slowly at first, creeping closer to the screen with each flip of the dial. And it wasn't just a shadow anymore, it was a person, or something like a person. A tall, emaciated figure with hollow eyes and long, crooked fingers. Its skin was pale and cracked, its mouth stretched too wide, as though it was wearing a mask of human skin pulled too tight, and it was watching them. "Shut it off," Serena muttered, her hands trembling. But Ethan was frozen. The figure seemed aware of them now, tilting its head as if studying them back. Then in one final flicker of the device, the figure reached out and tapped glass from the other side. The lights in the lab flickered. A cold breeze swept through the room, though there were no windows or doors open. Serena gasped, her eyes wide with terror. The figure wasn't on the screen anymore. It was standing in the room with them. How did it cross over?" Ethan stammered, stumbling backward. Serena didn't answer. She was paralyzed. Her gaze locked on the entity before them. The air around it seemed to warp and twist, reality itself bending under its presence. It stepped closer, the sound of its breath like a death rattle echoing in the lab. Its long, crooked fingers reached out toward them. "Turn it back on!" Serena screamed. "We need to shut the gateway!" Ethan scrambled to the controls, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He hit the switch, trying to force the fractured device to reverse the process. The figure, now mere feet away, smiled, or something close to a smile. The skin around its mouth tore slightly as it stretched wider. Just as Ethan hit the final command, the room went black. A loud hum filled the air, vibrating through their bones, and then silence. For a moment there was nothing but darkness. Then the lights flickered back on. The figure was gone. Ethan collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, while Serena stood frozen, still staring at the spot where the figure had stood. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. The lab was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the machines. "We need to shut this down," Serena finally whispered. "We never should have opened this door." Ethan nodded, but deep down he knew it was too late. Something had crossed over, something that didn't belong. They had glimpsed the darkest corners of the multiverse, and now those corners knew they existed. In the following days, strange things began to happen. People reported seeing shadows in their homes, flickering just out of sight. Others claimed they heard whispering voices in the dead of night, but the worst were those who simply vanished. One minute they were there, the next they were gone, as if they had never existed at all. Ethan and Serena worked tirelessly to reverse the damage, to close the gateways they had inadvertently opened. But no matter what they did, the figure returned. It appeared in reflections, in dreams, always watching, always waiting. The multiverse was infinite, yes, but not every version of reality was safe. Some were prisons, and something had escaped. Ethan realized this one night when he saw it standing at the foot of his bed. Its hollow eyes stared down at him as it whispered in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You've opened the door. Now we all can come through. And as the figure faded into the shadows, Ethan knew that the world he lived in, the world they all lived in, was no longer their own. It was only a matter of time before the rest followed,